All right, hey everyone. You ready to really get into it today?
Yeah.
Because we are talking about something that is pretty intense and a lot of people are talking about it. So we really want to just take a deep dive into this.
Absolutely.
The potential peace deal in the Russo-Ukrainian war.
Yeah.
And I know you've probably all heard something about it, but we really want to go beyond just the headlines and look at what's really going on here.
Yeah.
So we've got news articles, we've got expert opinions, we've even got some social media reactions.
That's right.
So we can really kind of gauge the temperature of everything.
I think it's important we do that too, because this is a very sensitive topic and everyone seems to have a very strong opinion about it.
Yes. And we want to be fair. We want to present all sides of the story.
Absolutely.
But also give you the information you need to understand what's happening and why it matters.
Yeah. Why should we care? I think that's the big question, right?
Exactly.
What's the impact on, our lives and, the world at large?
Right.
And I think that's what makes this such a fascinating story. It's not just some, far-off conflict that doesn't affect us.
Yeah.
This has the potential to really reshape the global landscape, and we're seeing that play out in real time.
Yeah, this isn't just like some history book thing. This is happening right now.
It's history in the making.
Yeah.
And what I find really striking is just the speed at which this whole situation has unfolded.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one day we're talking about potential offensives and stalemate, and then boom, next day we're hearing about, Trump's promise to end the war quickly.
Yeah, it's a head spinner for sure.
It is.
So to really grasp what's going on here, I think we need to rewind a bit.
Okay.
Go back in time.
Yeah, set the stage.
Because, this isn't some overnight crisis. The tension between Russia and Ukraine has been simmering for years.
Oh, absolutely. This goes way back. You can trace it back to 2014 with the annexation of Crimea by Russia.
Right.
That was already a major red flag,
Yeah.
a sign of things to come.
Yeah. And then, of course, in 2022, the full-scale invasion.
And I remember thinking, is this really happening?
Right. It felt surreal.
It felt like something out of a movie.
It did. It felt like we were going back in time.
Yeah.
To the Cold War era.
Yeah.
And it really shattered this, sense of peace and stability that many of us had come to take for granted.
Yeah. And there were attempts at peace talks before, right?
Yes, there were.
What happened to those?
Well, there were a couple rounds early on, in Belarus
Yeah.
and then later in Turkey.
Right.
But they ultimately went nowhere.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there was just a fundamental lack of trust,
Okay.
especially after the Bucha massacre.
Yeah.
I mean, when those images came out,
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
it just solidified this image of Russia as the aggressor,
Right.
and it made any kind of agreement seem almost impossible at the time.
Right. Right.
The world was just horrified by what they saw, and, rightfully so.
Yeah. And so it's pretty wild that now
It is.
Trump is suddenly, doing a 180.
Yeah.
It's like a complete shift in gears.
Yeah, and he campaigned on this.
Oh, absolutely. That was one of his big promises.
That he was going to end the war quickly.
Right. A stark contrast to Biden's approach.
Right, and Biden was all about,
Yeah, military aid.
military aid, hardline stance.
Taking a strong stance against Putin.
Yeah,
Not giving an inch.
yeah. So what happened? What made Trump change his tune?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think we have to look at the actions, not just the words.
Okay.
Because just days into his second term, he announces this highly productive call with Putin.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then suddenly we're hearing about peace negotiations.
Yeah, and then the next thing you know, Defense Secretary Hegseth is talking about
Concessions?
concessions. Whoa, hold on a second. We're not even at the table yet, and you're already...
Right. It's like they're waving the white flag before the battle even begins.
Yeah, and I specifically remember something about Ukraine maybe having to abandon its bid to join NATO,
Yes, that was a big one.
which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization for anyone who
Needs a refresher.
needs a refresher.
Yeah, not everyone's a foreign policy wonk.
Yeah, and potentially even accepting some of those territorial gains that Russia's made.
Yeah, that was a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I remember Hegseth saying that, Ukraine regaining its pre-2014 borders is
Unrealistic.
unrealistic. That's a pretty big statement.
It is. It's like they're setting the bar really low.
Yeah, and then there's this whole Riyadh meeting thing.
Oh, yeah, the secret squirrel meeting
Yeah, U.S. and Russian officials huddled together.
behind closed doors.
Yeah, hammering out who knows what, and Ukraine
Nowhere to be seen.
and the European allies are just what's going on?
Yeah, they're completely left out of the loop.
Yeah, what's the deal with that?
Well, it's interesting because the meeting itself didn't produce a concrete agreement.
Okay.
But it did lay the groundwork for future discussions.
Yeah.
But what's concerning is this initial focus on a U.S.-Russia agreement
Right.
and kind of sidelining Ukraine in the process.
Yeah.
It's almost like a return to this, Cold War mentality
Right.
where the superpowers just decide the fate of smaller nations.
Yeah. And I can see why Zelensky's like, what? No way.
Oh, he's furious. He's made it very clear that he doesn't trust Putin one bit.
Right.
And that any deal has to include Ukraine from the get-go.
Yeah.
And he's not alone in that. A lot of European leaders are starting to get really nervous about this whole situation.
Yeah.
They're seeing this, potential for appeasement, and they're saying, wait a minute, we've seen this movie before.
Right.
And it doesn't end well.
Yeah, it's like giving a bully what they want. And then they
just coming back for more.
They just want more, yeah.
And, one quote that really stuck with me was from NATO Secretary General Rutte.
Yeah.
He said, "We cannot allow Russia to keep taking bites out of European territory. Appeasement will only embolden Putin further."
Yeah. That's a powerful statement.
It is. It's a call to action.
Yeah, so we've got Trump pushing for this quick deal.
Yeah, deal maker in chief.
Even if it means, like, making some major concessions.
Right. He wants a win.
And then we've got Zelensky in Europe who are like, whoa, hold on. They're saying not so fast.
Yeah, we're not just going to roll over here.
Exactly. They're standing their ground.
Yeah, this is a recipe for some serious tension.
Oh, absolutely. The stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah, and it's really hard to know what's going to happen next.
It is. It's a very fluid situation.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be prepared for any eventuality. Well, on that note, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll dive deeper into the controversies and concerns swirling around these peace talks. Stay with us.
Yeah, it really feels like we're on a knife's edge here.
It does.
Like, on one hand, there's this hope that a peace deal could actually end the fighting.
Yeah.
Stop the bloodshed.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand,
There's that fear.
that
any deal might be like, rushed
yeah.
and flawed.
Yeah, and set the stage for even more instability.
Exactly. And that brings us to, I think, the heart of the controversy surrounding these talks.
Okay.
There are three major concerns that keep popping up.
All right, lay it on me.
Okay, so we've got the concessions being discussed, the exclusion of key stakeholders like Ukraine,
Right.
and then this big question of whether Putin can actually be trusted
Yeah, can he?
to uphold any agreement he makes.
Yeah, let's unpack those a little bit, starting with the concessions.
Okay.
When I first heard about Ukraine possibly giving up its NATO aspirations,
Yeah.
and even ceding territory to Russia, my jaw, hit the floor.
I think a lot of people had that reaction.
Yeah, it seems like a huge win for Putin.
It does.
And like a potentially devastating blow to Ukraine's long-term security.
Yeah, that's what critics are saying. Like Senator Whitehouse.
Yeah.
He argues that these concessions basically reward Russia for its aggression.
Right.
And that it sets a dangerous precedent. Like saying, hey, it's okay to just
invade a country.
Invade a country.
Or do you want something?
You want something, yeah.
I know, it makes right.
And it's hard to shake this feeling that Ukraine is being sidelined.
Yeah, big time.
In all this. I mean, it's their country.
Exactly.
Their future on the line.
Right.
And yet they're not even at the table for these initial discussions.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, it's a bad look.
The optics are terrible.
Yeah.
Because it feeds into this narrative that this is just a deal between two powerful nations who are disregarding the wishes of those most affected.
Yeah. But maybe Trump knows something we don't.
Okay.
I mean, he keeps saying he has this very good relationship with Putin.
Right.
And that he believes Putin wants peace.
He does. He keeps saying that.
Do you think it's possible that he's seeing something that like everyone else is missing?
It's possible, but I think we also have to remember that Putin has a long track record of deception and broken promises.
Like when he said there were no plans to invade Ukraine.
Exactly.
And then boom, tanks rolling across the border.
Yeah, not exactly a trustworthy guy.
Right. And he keeps demanding these things, like recognition of annexed territories.
Right.
A guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO.
Yeah.
Lifting of sanctions.
He wants it all?
He wants it all. And he's not really offering much in return.
Not really.
Which makes you wonder about his commitment to
a genuine and lasting peace.
Yeah, a real peace.
Yeah, does he actually want peace or does he just want to win?
Yeah, and then to make things worse, Trump keeps making these comments about Zelensky.
Oh, yeah. His rhetoric has been...
Calling him a dictator. Come on, man.
It's not exactly diplomatic language.
Oh, it's not going to help things.
It just escalates tensions.
Yeah.
And, Zelensky actually has really high approval ratings in Ukraine.
Does he?
Oh, yeah. He's seen as a strong leader.
Yeah.
Someone who's standing up to Putin.
Yeah.
So Trump's comments are just alienating him and making it harder to find common ground.
So with all this going on,
yeah,
is a deal even possible?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are factors that could push things toward a deal.
Right.
Russia does have that military advantage right now.
Right.
And a negotiated settlement would allow Trump to declare victory.
Yeah.
End the war, big foreign policy achievement for him.
Legacy-defining moment?
Exactly.
But then you have Ukraine, who's been so resilient.
Yeah, they've been amazing.
And they have all this support from the West.
Tons of support.
And European leaders are pretty determined to not let Russia
get away with this.
Get away with it, yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to set that precedent.
Yeah.
It's a tough call. It feels like there are two paths.
Yeah, two very different paths.
One towards a deal.
Right.
Maybe a fragile one.
Potentially, yeah.
And the other towards continued conflict.
And uncertainty, yeah.
But, there's always a chance that a third path emerges, something we haven't even thought of yet.
That's true.
This situation is so fluid and dynamic that anything could happen.
It's like we're watching this high-stakes poker game.
It is. It really is.
Each player holding their cards close to their chest.
Yeah.
We can analyze the moves, speculate about motives, but we won't know the outcome.
Until the very end.
Until the final hand display.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a total nail-biter. And I think while we're watching all this unfold, it's easy to get lost in the headlines and the back and forth.
Right.
But we have to kind of zoom out for a second.
Okay.
And ask ourselves, what does success even look like here?
That's the big question, isn't it? What would a peace deal that actually works, what would that even look like?
Yeah, because silencing the guns is great, but...
Right, it's just the first step.
It can't be the only goal.
No, it has to be about building a lasting peace.
Yeah, something sustainable.
And not just in Ukraine.
Right.
But for the whole region.
So what needs to be in this magical peace deal then?
Well, first off, it has to guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
So no forced concessions?
Exactly. No legitimizing Russia's land grabs.
But what about security guarantees? Because they've already been invaded twice now.
Yeah, that's huge.
What's to stop it from happening again?
That's a critical point. Any deal would need some really solid security guarantees.
Okay.
Maybe international peacekeeping forces.
Okay.
Or a clear commitment from NATO to defend Ukraine.
Right, if they get attacked again.
Exactly, because without that, they're left vulnerable, and that's not acceptable.
And I feel like we also have to talk about accountability.
Oh, yeah.
There have been really horrific atrocities in this war.
Absolutely.
Can there really be peace without justice for the victims?
That's tough because while accountability is super important, demanding war crimes tribunals right away could actually derail any talks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe a phased approach would work better, where accountability happens as part of the peace process.
Right, it's like a long game.
Yeah, exactly.
So even if this miracle deal happens,
right,
it feels like the hard work is just beginning.
Oh, absolutely. Rebuilding trust, addressing the underlying causes, fostering reconciliation, that's all long-term stuff.
And what about the economic impact? Ukraine's been devastated.
Oh yeah, the infrastructure's wrecked.
Rebuilding that is going to take
a massive effort.
Years, probably.
Years and a lot of cooperation.
From everyone.
From everyone, including Russia.
So listening to all this, I have this weird mix of hope and anxiety.
Yeah, I get that.
Feels like peace is possible.
Yeah.
But the road there is going to be...
bumpy, for sure.
Bumpy is an understatement, I think.
It is. It's a very complex situation.
But hey, at least the talks are happening.
That's true. It's a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, a glimmer in a pretty dark time.
Yeah, and I think it's important to hold on to that glimmer.
Yeah.
Even while being realistic about the challenges ahead.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage all of you to stay informed.
Absolutely.
Keep following the story.
Keep asking those tough questions.
And think about the long-term implications, because no matter what happens, this is going to have a huge impact.
On all of us.
On all of us, yeah. So that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.